Hey guys, tonight we sail into the clouds. Not literally, you're still safely tucked in your bed, hopefully horizontal and wearing something cozy but close enough. We're travelling through time and tide to the ancient Philippine archipelago, a world of typhoon-lashed coastlines, impossibly green mountains, and seas so wide they seemed stitched together by stars. And in this world, long before compasses, before colonizers, before the word Philippines even existed, there were boats, big ones, beautiful ones. And if you're imagining dugout canoes and clumsy rafts bobbing like coconuts, you're about to be deeply, gloriously wrong. Because tonight, we're chasing the story of how ancient Filipinos built cloud-sweeping seaboats. And spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this ride. These vessels were fast, sharp, alive. They didn't just float, they danced. They didn't conquer with fire, they conquered with craftsmanship so elegant. It made invaders nervous. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening in bed, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're drifting off from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in a village where the forest smells of smoke, salt and sap. A man is sharpening a blade, long, slightly curved, designed not for war but for conversation with wood. Behind him, another is humming a tune older than memory, hands busy with rattan cords that look like rope but behave more like silk. They're not building a house, they're building something that breathes. The canoe taking shape beside them is already long enough to carry 30 men, and tall enough that the prow could reach toward the clouds when the surf lifts it just right. The sides are curved, not flat, not blocky, but swept, as if the boat itself remembers wind. The prow might have a carved head, sometimes a dragon, sometimes a crocodile, sometimes a bird with outstretched wings. This isn't just decoration, it's identity, direction, spirit. You walk along the hull, careful not to scuff the wood. The boat is warm under your fingers, smooth, alive. It hasn't even touched water yet, and it already feels like it's watching the ocean. The builders work without blueprints, no measuring tape, no technical diagrams. They cut and shape by memory, by instinct passed from father to son, uncle to nephew, master to apprentice. Historians still argue whether this process qualifies as engineering or art. The answer, of course, is both. You watch as a curved rib is gently bent into place using steam from boiling leaves. The builders press it to the hull, nod silently, then lash it tight with strips of rattan. No nails, no glue, just pressure, rhythm, and time. Quirky fact: the rattan tightens when wet, so every time the boat hits the sea, it gets stronger. Few women approach the work site. They don't touch the tools, but they're not idle. One offers rice wine to the builders, another brings oil to rub into the wood. A third murmurs a short chant, quiet, almost shy, before slipping away. You don't need to ask. You feel it. This isn't just construction, it's ritual. The boat isn't just being made, it's being invited. There's a belief here that every great tree has a soul, so when you cut one down to make a boat, you don't just take it, has to agree. That's why the first step wasn't cutting at all. It was asking, with incense, with song, with offerings buried in the roots. You sit for a while, watching the boat take form. It doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel forced. It feels like the forest and the sea are meeting each other halfway. And when it's finally done, days, weeks, maybe even months from now, this boat won't just carry goods or people. It will carry stories across islands, across generations, maybe even across oceans. But for now, the sun sets behind the hills and the builders lay down their blades. The boat rests, halfway shaped, halfway dreaming. And you, lucky traveller, close your eyes to the sound of leaves rustling, like sails about to unfurl. Morning slides in like honey slow, golden, quiet enough not to wake the birds. You're already up, sitting cross-legged near the edge of the clearing, just close enough to see what today's rhythm will be. The builders are stretching, muttering greetings, checking the lashings they tied yesterday. And right in the middle of it all is the master carver, the Panday. He's older than most, eyes creased like bark, hands that look like they could split a coconut just by holding it too tightly. But when he touches the wood, he does it like he's greeting a friend. No rush, no show, just familiarity. You're in the Visayas now, central islands of the Philippine archipelago, where the art of boat building was elevated into a kind of breathing philosophy. The Visayans weren't just seafarers, they were artists, warriors, traders, and above all, they were builders of bangka, para, caracoa, and, most famously, the Balangay. The boats made here aren't random local projects, they're family affairs, clan affairs, sometimes even regional affairs. A well-made boat is a source of honour, of pride and, yes, of potential maritime dominance. You're not just building transport, you're building identity. The Panday walks along the keel, tapping it softly. He's checking the tone. That's right, he listens to the wood. No joke. A good hull sings when tapped. Dull sound too dry. Hollow clunk too green. Clean. Crisp note. That's your match. He gestures to a younger assistant, maybe his grandson. Maybe someone who's just really eager, and together they start shaving thin layers from the edge of a new board. There's no sandpaper here, just a blade so sharp it could divide a shadow. The shavings curl like ribbon and fall gently to the ground. Every so often, one of the carvers picks up a shaving and sniffs it, for moisture, for spirit. Historians still argue whether Visayan boats were modelled after Chinese junks or were wholly indigenous innovations. But the way these builders move fluid, intuitive, conversational, it's hard to believe they learned this from anyone but the sea itself. And the tool's basic. A few adzes, some chisels, a mallet. The real tool is memory. These men don't draw plans. They measure with their body's arm spans, finger widths, the length of a stride. It's like the blueprint lives in their bones. One of the quirkiest bits, they believe boats have personalities, not metaphors, actual personalities. Some boats are shy, some are proud. Some prefer certain crew members and refuse to sail well without them. If a boat rocks too much at anchor, someone will quietly whisper to it, like calming a child, and it works. You watch as they fit two massive planks together, edges carefully matched. They don't glue, they don't nail. They drill tiny holes and slip in tree nails, wooden pegs, pounded in snug. Then, they lash the entire seam with strips of rattan soaked in water. And here's the part that still baffles shipwrights to this day: it doesn't leak. It flexes, moves, breathes. When a modern ship hits a wave, it resists. When a Visayan boat hits a wave, it rolls with it. That's how they last. That's how they glide. That's how they survive. You take a step closer and spot a carving just under the gunwale, a row of tiny triangles, each one slightly different. You ask someone what it means. They tell you it's the cudliter mark the Panday adds to bless the hull, like signing a masterpiece. Every builder has their own style. You've just seen this boat signature. Women arrive again, different ones from yesterday. They're carrying coconut oil, crushed turmeric, ginger, and lime. They're not here to cook. They're here for ritual. They rub these into the hull, into the lashings, into the figurehead. Each ingredient means something: protection, clarity, speed. And as the boat takes form, the village gathers, not just to help, to witness. The making of a boat isn't just construction, it's ceremony, it's celebration. Sometimes it's the closest thing to theatre they'll see all year. A few kids run by, laughing, shouting that the caracal will fly faster than the birds this time. One of the builders snorts and says, "Only if you learn to row, boy." The boat is almost ready for her first blessing, and you, dreamer of sea foam and starlight, sit down again. Just as the sun warms the forest edge and the scent of fresh-cut wood mixes with incense in the wind, the boat stretches in the light, long and proud and not quite finished. But soon, very soon, she'll touch the sea. The village is awake now, not just stirring, but humming. Chickens scatter from underfoot. Smoke spirals from cooking fires. There's laughter, but it's hushed, like everyone knows today is important. The boat, still cradled in her wooden braces, looks different this morning. Not bigger, not brighter, just aware. The Panday kneels by the keel, hands clasped not in work but in prayer. You shuffle a little closer, careful not to interrupt, and catch the scent of crushed betel leaf and coconut husk. Nearby, someone is lighting a tiny fire in a clay pot. It's not for warmth, it's for asking permission. Because before the final shaping, before the boat meets the sea, there's a ritual older than ink. A quiet, spoken contract between maker and spirit. You see it in the way the oldest woman in the village arrives without being called, eyes half closed, carrying a bundle of something wrapped in banana leaf, inside offerings rice, ginger, few shiny beads, maybe even a small chicken feather. She walks the length of the boat, muttering low phrases you don't recognize, tapping her bundle lightly on the hull every few steps. It's not for show. This isn't about entertainment. It's about balance. The boat's body must be whole, but its soul must be ready too. Historians still argue whether this ritual was religious, cultural, or symbolic. Some claim it was animism. Others call it ancestor veneration. But you don't need a label when you see the way every villager holds their breath as the woman pauses at the prow. Then, gently, she presses her forehead to the wood. The ceremony ends in silence. The next stage begins final assembly. You notice something strange. There are no nails, not one. The planks are joined with dowels, lashed with rattan, and sealed with resin made from apatong tree sap. Why? Because nails rust, iron stiffens, but wood flexes, and in a world of waves and weather, you want flexibility. They add outriggers next two long bamboo arms, stretched out on either side of the hull like the wings of a seabird mid-flight. These are the katig, and they're what make the boat truly magic. Without them, she's fast. With them, she's untouchable. Outriggers let the boat slice through rough seas without rolling. They balance, absorb shock, and make even typhoon-churned water feel like a steady breeze. You've seen a surfboard, sure, but you haven't seen a boat that leans into the wind like this. A younger builder starts attaching sagwan long paddles carved from dao wood, thin but strong. He strokes the air absently, mimicking the motion. Another climbs onto the hull and starts polishing the prow with oil-soaked cloth. The wood glows, not flashy. Not flashy at all, but luminous, like it's storing sunlight for the voyage. Here's a quirky little touch: some of these boats have teeth. No, really. The prow is often carved with sharp edges or actual fang-like protrusions, part aesthetic, part spiritual. It's said they bite through bad weather, or scare away jealous spirits, or maybe just let rival villages know this boat doesn't come quietly. You peer beneath the hull. It's curved like a crescent moon, perfect for lifting over shallow reefs, smooth enough to surf a wave into shore like it's nothing. And that shape, it wasn't measured with tools. It was felt, guided by thumb pressure and blade angle, judged by how the wood wanted to bend. One builder smirks and says, if you listen to the timber, it tells you what kind of boat it wants to be. You believe him, because standing here now, beside this nearly finished vessel, it doesn't feel like watching a thing being built. It feels like witnessing a being come to life. The sun is overhead now. Lunch is called. Work pauses. The boat rests, long and lean and smelling of wood smoke and salt. You sit beneath the shade of a mango tree, watching the shadows stretch across the hull, and in your mind, you already see her moving, carving white lines through blue water, prow rising like it wants to kiss the clouds. Not yet, though. She's patient. She knows she was carved for something greater than the shore. Afternoon settles in like steam rising from rice, warm, slow, and golden. The sun has softened just enough to stop scalding your eyes, and the shadows under the boat are longer now, stretched like lazy cats beneath the hull. The builders are back from their meal, a few chewing beetle nut, others already waist-deep in final prep. Because today's the day. The Balangay is ready to meet the sea. Now, the Balangay isn't just any boat. She's not a fishing canoe, not a raft, not a ferry to get across the bay. She's a voyager. A boat that remembers the curve of the stars, a boat that's seen more islands than most people see sunsets. And here's the part that makes historians blink twice: she's also ancient. As in, at least 1,000 years old. Actual Balangay boats have been excavated from the marshy banks of Butuan. In northern Mindanao, fully preserved wooden vessels built using the exact same doweling and lashing techniques you're watching now. Dated to the 4th century. That's older than most European castles. Older than Viking longships. Older than your tendency to lose socks in the laundry. But the Balangay isn't just old. She's smart. She's built to hold people in tight formation, often 30 to 60 per vessel, rows of paddlers, a few helmsmen, some warriors, a spiritual guide, a navigator, and always a leader. These weren't aimless floats. These were organized floating communities, complete with roles, hierarchy, and protocols. Like cruise ships. If cruise ships could cut through enemy blockades and still look great doing it, you walk alongside the finished hull now, marveling at the sheer size, bigger than it looked in pieces. The lashings are tight, the wood burnished, the ribs are perfectly spaced, and inside, the longest flat deck is already stacked with bundles, bamboo poles, coiled ropes, jars sealed with wax, palm-wrapped food. She's not just ready to float, she's ready to go. A few young men climb in, barefoot, laugh us nervously. First timers, maybe. They sit on benches, fidgeting with the paddles. One older rower slaps the side of the boat and says, "Don't wiggle." She doesn't like that. You raise an eyebrow. He's dead serious, because the Balangay is more than wood. She has presence, identity, a kind of consciousness that every sailor respects even if they don't talk about it too much. You treat her well, and she'll carry you far. You disrespect her good luck. She'll rock you until your teeth rattle or strand you on a reef with no fish and too many mosquitoes. Quirky fact. These boats sometimes had names, not like Sea Princess or Boaty McBoatface. Think more like Morning Light, Mistwalker, or The One Who Listens. The names weren't painted, they were spoken, quietly, repeated like a secret, and only by those who belonged on board. Today's launch is ceremonial. A group gathers at the beach, drums in hand, voices raised not loud, but steady, rhythmic. The Panday leads the procession, carrying a small bowl of ash mixed with oil. He paints a few lines on the prow protection symbols, passed down for centuries. You don't know what they mean exactly, but they make your chest feel warm. The tide is right, the sand is damp but firm. Everyone gathers around the boat, and then they push. It's not a loud push. No grunting, no shouting, just effort. Synchronized. You help. 2 palms flat against smooth wood, feet digging in. The boat resists for a moment, then begins to slide. Slowly, like waking from a long nap. She crests the ridge of sand and glides into the water. She floats instantly. Of course she does, because she was meant to. The Balangay rocks gently, as if getting her bearings. The paddlers hop in. A low cheer rises from the crowd. Someone throws petals. Someone else tosses a coin. It hits the water with a soft plink, and the boat catches her first real wave. She rides it like she remembers how. You walk to the shoreline, your feet in the surf. The boat glides past, her prow now pointing to the horizon, any horizon. She hasn't chosen her direction yet, but it doesn't matter. She's alive now, and the wind is waiting. The boat is in the water now, swaying gently like she's testing her sea legs. The paddlers dip their oars, tentative at first, then stronger, then in perfect rhythm. You stand ankle deep in the surf, watching the Balangay slip across the water as if it's silk instead of salt, as if the boat were less a thing and more a thought. And then they raise the sail. It's not the kind of sail you expect, not square, not triangle, not some leftover pirate movie prop. This one is shaped like a claw-curved, asymmetrical, with wide, bat-like arms that lean hard into the wind. It's called a crab claw sail, and it looks like it shouldn't work, but it does. In fact, it works brilliantly. This sail design, used by the Austronesian ancestors of the ancient Filipinos, isn't just unique, it's genius. It's aerodynamic. It can catch wind from almost any angle. And here's the kicker. It lets the boat tack. That means sail against the wind. Westerners had to wait for the Renaissance to figure that one out. Meanwhile, these guys were already zigzagging through typhoons with sails shaped like origami dragons. The Balangay doesn't so much move as glide. She leans into the breeze, tilts just enough to remind you she's alive, and starts cutting long, smooth lines across the bay. You can't help it. You exhale softly, like watching a dancer take the first graceful step across a silent stage. Historians still argue whether the sail technology originated from the Philippines or was adapted from other Austronesian cultures like those in Micronesia and Polynesia. But there's no doubt Filipinos took it and made it their own. They stitched sails from woven palm fibre, coated them with oil to resist rain, and painted them in stripes that caught the sun like wings. One quirky fact: some Caracoa, the sleek, narrow warships, had double sails, not because they needed speed, just because they liked speed. These were the drag racers of the sea, pulling off turn-on-a-shell manoeuvres while other ships were still hoisting their canvas. You're watching it now, your Balangay slicing wide arcs through open water. The wind shifts, and instead of turning awkwardly or flapping uselessly, the sail just dips and leans. The boat responds instantly, cutting a tight loop that would make a modern sailor weep with envy. There's no wheel, no compass, no navigational chart, just the wind, the waves, the clouds. Yes, clouds. Because when you're sailing across thousands of islands without map, you learn to read everything. The clouds tell you where the weather's going, their shapes, heights, even their shadows on the water give clues. A certain kind of cloud always hangs near land. Another kind warns of rough seas. And then there are the birds. They don't fly randomly. Seabirds follow feeding routes, wind patterns, and most importantly fly home before night, a flock on the horizon flying low and fast. That's a sign of land, or at least something solid beneath the sky. The sailors on this boat know all of this. They don't talk about it like science. It's memory. It's body knowledge. They feel the wind on their cheeks and know whether to shift left or right. They taste the air and sense when rain is coming. They tilt their heads, squint at the sky, and read it like a scroll no outsider could ever interpret. You sit in the shallows now, the tide around your knees. The boat is smaller in the distance, a dark wing against the pale blue. The sail flutters once, then fills. The boat jumps forward, light and sure, heading not toward a destination but into possibility. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you feel it, the wind at your back, the creak of rattan lashings under your feet, the breath of the sea holding you upright like a second spine. This isn't just transportation. This is freedom. This is what the Balangay was built for. To move not just across water, but through the wind. The wind has teeth now, but friendly ones. It nips just enough to lift the corners of the sail, enough to send shivers down the ropes, enough to make you squint into the horizon and wonder how anyone ever found their way out here without getting permanently turned around. And yet, they did. Not once, not twice, thousands of times. Because ancient Filipino sailors weren't just boat builders or paddlers, they were navigators, the kind who didn't need maps, didn't check a compass, didn't squint at a GPS signal that kept saying recalculating. They navigated with everything else: the sky, the sea, the salt, the birds, the taste of wind. You step into the boat now, taking a seat near the centre, where the deck is dry but low enough that the sea's breath still reaches your ankles. Around you, men and women move with unspoken coordination. No orders shouted, no fingers pointed. Everyone just knows. The helmsman, barefoot, arms roped with muscle, leans into the tiller with the casual authority of someone who could probably steer blindfolded. Beside him, the navigator tilts his head toward the sky. He's not looking at clouds now. He's looking at stars. They begin to appear, faint at first. Just one, then three, then dozens, shimmering against the indigo ceiling like droplets of melted glass. And you're not here to just watch. You're here to learn. Here's what they know that you don't. The sky isn't chaos. It's a clock, a compass, a calendar. The stars rise and fall in predictable arcs, each one telling you something different. The Pleiades cluster, time to start planting. Orion's belt, keep sailing south. The Southern Cross. You're drifting a little too far, friend. And that's just the start. Historians still argue whether this knowledge was written down in any formal way. Most believe it was memorized, passed down from elder to apprentice in chants, dances, even dream fragments. It wasn't astronomy, it was inheritance. And then there's the sea itself, not just the surface, the texture. You run your fingers over the water. It's not all one motion. There are at least 3 currents moving here. One warm, one cold, one layered like a snake beneath them both. The navigator knows these. He doesn't explain. He just shifts his balance, touches the sail line, and the boat corrects course. And the clouds. You look up again. There's a band of wispy cirrus running east to west, another low bank of thick cumulus near the horizon. You watch them like a weather report, but to the navigator, they're landmarks. There's a certain shape that always forms near mountains, a certain stillness that hugs flat islands, and if all else fails, there's the birds. A flock of frigates suddenly burst from the left side of the boat. The crew doesn't flinch. They literally count how many, how high, how fast. They're reading those birds the way you might read street signs, but they do it instinctively. One quirky tidbit. Some ancient navigators kept ropes marked with knots, each one representing a distance or directional change. They'd run their fingers along the rope at night, humming softly, remembering the journey not in sight, but in sequence. A kind of oceanic rosary, tactile GPS, centuries ahead of its time. You lie back on the deck now, letting the stars fill your view. The sail creaks overhead, and the boat rocks gently like a cradle. Someone nearby hums a tune you don't know but somehow recognize. This is what sailing was like before modernity wrapped it in wires and engines and panic. No motors, no alarms, no anchor-clad anxiety, just movement, memory, sky. The boat slides across the water so smoothly you forget what stillness felt like. You're no longer a passenger. You're part of the boat, part of the wind. Part of a conversation between people and nature that's been going on long before history noticed. You drift, not lost, not searching, just moving, following starlight and breath, trusting the sea and the hands that built this boat to whisper back to the clouds. The stars above have thickened now, no longer scattered points, but a full-blown map sprawled across the heavens. You lie back against the smooth, warm planks of the Balangay, the deck rising and falling beneath you like the chest of a sleeping animal. The sail above flutters softly, catching wind as if it's plucking lullabies from the sky. You feel the boat move, not jolting, not jerking, just a long, steady slide forward. You can't even see the island you left anymore. It's already vanished behind the curve of the sea. But you're not afraid, because this boat wasn't built to follow lines on a map. It was built to remember. The Pandey, the master boat builder, once said that every plank remembers its position, that the hull itself knows how it should come together, and now, under the stars, you start to believe it, because this boat was built with no blueprints, just hands and memory. You sit up and watch the horizon. The helmsman is resting now. A younger sailor stands in his place, quiet and sure. Another crew member is retying one of the lashings, checking it with practiced fingers, not because it's loose, but because it's time. Every task here is done not on a schedule, but in rhythm. There was never a plan on paper, no sketch, no diagrams, just the builders, standing around a tree, arguing softly, then nodding, then cutting, then shaping, then joining, each one carrying a fragment of the whole picture in their head. Historians still argue how this was even possible. Some call it muscle memory, others call it ancestral knowledge. A few propose it was training so intensive that it became biological, a kind of cellular wisdom passed down like eye colour. But here's what you notice. The boat feels right, balanced, poised. It doesn't shudder when it turns. It doesn't creak when it catches wind. Everything about it works, not just because it's been built, but because it's been understood. The boards are joined with hand-cut mortises and wooden pegs. The lashings, made of soaked rattan, twist around the ribs in looping patterns so secure it feels like the boat is hugging itself. No nails, no glue, just tension, just trust. One of the crew members, noticing your gaze, grins and says, "She doesn't like straight lines. She prefers curves." You believe him. You step forward now, running your hand along the edge of the deck. The planks are slightly uneven, not sloppy, just human, like they were made for feet, not measuring sticks. Each board was bent using steam carefully, patiently over fire pits filled with boiling palm leaves. The wood was never forced, just invited. And that's the thing, isn't it? This boat wasn't manufactured. It was negotiated into existence. You remember the tree from which the keel was carved, how it was chosen not for size alone, but for spirit. The way offerings were made, the way the first cut was taken not with a swing, but with a whisper. Because to make a boat like this, you don't just need tools, you need listening. Quirky detail. Some builders wouldn't start carving until they dreamed about the boat, not in metaphor, not as inspiration, literally dreamed visions of the prow, the lashings, the shape of the sail. If the dream didn't come, the build didn't start. You ask one of the crew if that still happens. He nods. My grandfather says if the dream is clear, the boat won't sink. Simple, chilling, completely believable. You sit again as the moon rises, its silver light glancing off the water like scattered coins. The boat creaks once, just enough to remind you she's still awake, still moving, and you wonder how many hands have built boats like this. How many grandfathers stood barefoot beside the trunk of a tree, tracing their palm across the bark, wondering what kind of voyage lived inside the wood. How many sons watched silently, learning not with words, but with eyes. How many daughters whispered blessings into seams before the final lashing was tied. You look back at the sail. It shivers slightly, leans, and the boat follows. Still no compass, still no maps, just the shape of a dream, carved into the sea. The night drapes itself around the boat like a second sail, cool, soft, absolute. The stars are steady now, like they've agreed to stay in place just for you, and the wind hums through the lines like an old lullaby you never quite learned the words to. You're still awake, rocked gently by the rhythm of the sea and the memories woven into the boat beneath you. And just when you think you've heard all the stories a boat could hold, the paddler beside you says, almost too quietly, "She won't go if she isn't asked." You turn. He's not joking. Before the first paddle stroke, before the first sail is pulled taut, before the first offering is made to the sea. The boat, this boat. Every boat must be asked, because the ancient Filipinos didn't believe they were just building vessels. They were making beings, and every being, whether bird, child, or balangay, had a spirit, a soul, a name that was whispered, not shouted, a presence. Before they cut the first plank, the builders performed a ritual, sometimes at dawn, sometimes at dusk, always when the air was still and the tree was listening. They approached the chosen tree, often a towering apitong or lawan, and brought offerings: rice, betel nut, oil, sometimes even a chicken, though always respectfully. They burned leaves, spoke prayers, traced patterns in the soil. Then, and only then, they asked, "Are you willing?" Historians still argue whether this was a form of animism, ancestor reverence, or something else entirely. But it wasn't superstition, it was structure. Just like you wouldn't barge into someone's home without knocking, you didn't carve a soul out of a wood without permission. You watch the boat now, remembering the hull as it rested in the forest clearing, how it curved even before it moved, how it seemed to lean toward the sea before it ever touched water. That wasn't design, that was invitation, and when the final plank was shaped, when the lashings were sealed, when the figurehead was carved and placed, they held a blessing. Not just a "may it sail safely" kind of thing, a full rite. They dressed in clean robes, they called the village, they circled the hull, sang songs passed down like heirlooms. They rubbed coconut oil into the wood, wove banig mats for the deck, and offered the first drop of water cupped in 2 hands to the prow. You ask why. The paddler shrugs, to make sure she knows where she's going. And here's the wildest part. Sometimes the boat would answer. Not in words, not in magic, just signs. A sudden gust, a perfectly still breeze, a bird landing on the prow, a shadow in the water, and the elders would nod and say, "She agrees, she's ready." Quirky fact. Some boats were believed to have specific moods. Not general vibes, actual emotional patterns. Some would sail best under moonlight. Others preferred morning launches. Some didn't like noisy crews. Others demanded songs. A quiet boat trouble. A humming boat. Good omen. And if the boat really liked you, you got to name her. But not like we name boats now. You didn't paint the name. You whispered it. You told it to her during the launch. You repeated it when the waves grew rough. You sang it when you reached your destination. And you never ever said it without respect. You ask the paddler if this boat has a name. He smiles, then turns back to the sea. You get your answer. The wind shifts again. The sail catches just right. The boat lifts a little, cresting a gentle wave with the grace of a bird catching an updraft. And suddenly you feel it. Not the wood beneath you, not the swell, not even the salt in your lungs. You feel the presence of a boat not just made, but born. The morning light creeps over the horizon like it's been walking all night, pale, pinkish, and just a little dazed. You're already up, blinking into it, wrapped in a woven blanket that smells faintly of salt and wood smoke. Around you, the crew stirs slowly, yawning without shame, stretching like cats. The Balangay hasn't stopped moving, but she's softened her rhythm, no longer slicing, just gliding. And above you, like the wings of some seabird dreaming of the sky, the crab claw sail still holds steady. You watch it, thinking, how did this even happen? How did a people without engines or charts or formal written records manage to build boats that could outpace storms and cross open sea with more accuracy than most people can walk to the fridge in the dark? The answer is, in that sail, it doesn't just catch wind, it reads it. Unlike square sails that struggle with subtle shifts, the crab claw adjusts like a dancer, twisting, bowing, sweeping. The mast is offset. The boom curves. The angles seem awkward until you see them in action, and then they make perfect sense. Sailors move with it, not against it. They don't bark orders. They make suggestions. And the sail, like a well-trained animal, responds, tilts here, eases there, and when the gusts change mood because wind has moods, everyone knows that the whole rig breathes with it. It's graceful, fluid, almost invisible. Historians still argue how early these sails appeared in the Philippines. Some claim Chinese influence. Others trace it through the broader Austronesian migration. A few suggest the design developed in parallel through centuries of trial and observation. No one agrees, but all agree on this: it works. You glance up again as a crew member adjusts the line, not by much, just a flick of his wrist, tightening something that looks more like woven vine than rope. The sail hums softly, like it's content. And here's the wild part: they often stitch these sails by hand, out of pandan leaves or layers of abaca fibre, oiled, cured, and softened with smoke until they held together like woven leather. Not fancy, just functional, and strangely beautiful. You sit near the centre mast now, watching a young sailor prepare something. He's painting, yes, painting, not names, not logos, but symbols, curved, sweeping lines, arcs, spirals, sometimes dots or eyes or stylized birds. He tells you they're meant to teach the wind who we are. You try to figure out if he's serious. He is. Because the Balangay isn't just a machine, it's a message. A moving one. When a boat like this sails into a bay, it doesn't sneak in. It announces. The sail is its banner, its identity, its soul, made visible. Some boats even had sails painted so bright reds, oranges, sunburst yellows that enemy ships thought they were aflame from a distance. Strategic misdirection, or maybe just style. Either way, it worked. You watch the painter's hand. No brush. Just a rag wrapped around 2 fingers, dipped in ink made from soot and oil and some herb you don't recognize. He works quickly, not careless, just confident, like he's done this since before he knew how to speak. He finishes with a long, sweeping arc near the base. You ask what it means. He shrugs. This one, it's for luck, or maybe for storms. It depends. You don't ask further, because part of you knows you're not supposed to understand all of it. Some of these symbols are private, some are tribal. Some are made up on the spot, answers to questions only the sea would dare ask. The sail rises again now, catching a stronger gust. The boat leans just slightly. The ropes go taut. The wood creaks softly, and you realize you're watching something most people will never truly see. A conversation between wind and art and memory. The Balangay tips forward, lifting her prow like she's smelling something distant, an island, a shore, a promise. And you just lean back and let the sail tell you where to go next. The horizon tilts gently beneath your feet, not enough to alarm you, just enough to remind you that the sea is alive and that the Balangay was built to flirt with it. The wind is brisker now, flaring the sail like a lung filled with song, and the crew moves like they've done this dance 100 times. Because they have. But this isn't just a day of peaceful gliding. Not always. Sometimes the Balangay sailed into action. You shift your weight as the helmsman different from last night. Broader shoulders, more scarred hands signals a sharp turn. The boat leans, the outriggers flex like legs, and you're suddenly reminded these weren't just exploration vessels. They were warships, not the kind with cannons, the kind with grace, with presence, the kind that appeared on a distant shore so suddenly and beautifully that people stopped what they were doing just to stare right before realizing this wasn't a visit. It was a statement. You're now on a caracoa, the sleeker cousin of the Balangay, faster, sharper, often painted with bold patterns, sunbursts, stripes, waves, eyes. Why? Because these ships weren't just weapons, they were art, and the men on board not just sailors, not just warriors, stylists. Imagine warriors arriving in war paint and bright red sashes, wearing mother-of-pearl armour and feathered headdresses, weapons in one hand, poems in the other. They brought blades and fashion, intimidation and elegance, one quirky detail. Some of these raiding crews would chant insults in verse while approaching enemy shores, not shouting, singing. Imagine being insulted so beautifully you almost didn't mind being invaded. Historians still argue about the scale and scope of these raids. Were they piracy? Were they political? Were they prestige displays? The answer is probably yes to all. The goal wasn't just loot. It was reputation, power, a reminder that their boats could get anywhere and fast. And these weren't small-time operations. Some fleets were massive 10, 20 ships moving in formation. Coordinated through drums and hand signals, they trained for speed, for turns, for presence. A good caracoa could do a full rotation in seconds, its outriggers cutting arcs in the water like brushstrokes. You sit near the prow now, watching as a crew member sharpens a blade. Not out of fear, just habit. The blade isn't crude, it's elegant. And beside it lies a small case of charms beads, feathers, scraps of cloth tied with hair, protection, luck, identity. Because even in battle, the sea ruled everything, and the sea played favourites. The ship tips again, just for fun this time, a practice turn. The crew laughs, a few mock stumble, one grins and says, "She's testing us." You believe it. You run your hand along the carved edge of the prow. The pattern here is different, more aggressive. Sharp lines, edges like teeth. You recognize the style from older carvings you saw back on land. Some were crocodiles, some were birds. This one hard to tell, could be both, could be neither, because sometimes the design wasn't meant to represent an animal. Sometimes it was meant to be the spirit of the boat, and if you ask too many questions, they'll just smile and say, "You don't need to understand, just paddle when she tells you to." You feel that now. The boat isn't waiting for directions, she's making them. You lean back again, letting the sail block half the sun. You think about the men and women who sailed like this centuries ago, not with watches or ranks, but with roles, paddlers, navigators, steersmen, singers, listeners, each one necessary, no one idle. The sea didn't care who you were on land. Out here, your hands had to work, your eyes had to read sky, and your feet had to find balance fast. So you sit still now, balanced, listening, to the wind in the sail, to the water under the outriggers, to the rhythm of the paddles, to the memory in the wood, and somewhere, not in words, not in voice, you hear the boat whisper, "Watch, I was made to fly." The midday heat settles over the boat like a warm blanket someone forgot to fold. The water has gone glassy, glinting like a blade as the Balangay slides over it with eerie ease. There's no resistance, no slapping waves, just that long, endless hush of movement through water too calm to complain. You take shelter beneath a rolled mat, propped like a tiny tent at the stern. From here, you can see the whole crew, from the youngest paddler dozing against the side rail to the oldest navigator scanning the horizon, not for land, but for signs. A ripple, a bird, a change in wind tone. But as you watch the crew, something begins to stand out, or rather, someone's missing. There are no women on this boat, and yet you know they're here. Not physically, not visibly, but present all the same. Because while the men may have carved the hull and lashed the outriggers, the soul of the boat, that part often came from women. You learn that in the stories whispered during quieter moments, the ones not told in public, like how some women were midwives not just for babies but for boats. Their hands were the last to bless the hull before it touched the sea. They tied the final knot, they sang the final chant. No launch was complete without them. Quirky fact: some regions believed women's voices could calm the water. Not all women, just the right ones. The ones with the songs passed down like recipes. Soft melodies meant not to entertain, but to reassure the sea that the crew aboard was worth letting pass. Historians still debate how involved women were in the shipbuilding process. Some claim they were excluded entirely. Others argue they oversaw materials, managed the labour flow, or even directed elements of the ritual. One fringe theory suggests some women held the role of boat whisperers, consultants, who sensed when a boat was unhappy. And why not? These weren't dead machines. They were living collaborators. And if boats could speak and everyone acted like they could, then someone had to know how to listen. You imagine a woman standing at the shore during the final launch. She doesn't speak loudly. She doesn't interrupt. She just watches. And at the last moment, steps forward and presses her fingers against the prow just once. No words, just a touch. And the boat sails better. Out here, on the open sea, you remember that, especially when the wind grows restless, especially when the sail flaps a little too violently. Someone reaches out not to the sail, but to the deck and mutters something like a promise. And it works. Then there's the other kind of presence, less comforting, more watchful, the spirits. Every boat, especially the proud ones, the fast ones, carries a few, not ghosts, not monsters, just entities, not always kind, not always cruel, just present. There are rituals to invite the right ones, and other rituals to keep the wrong ones out. Some crews bring charms, amulets, bags of salt, small wooden dolls. Others place a sliver of human bone, yes, really beneath the prow, not as a curse, but as a compass, an anchor to the living world. And if the boat feels off, the crew doesn't just tighten ropes. They ask questions, out loud. Because if something's wrong, it's not always mechanical, it might be spiritual, maybe a displeased ancestor, maybe an ignored offering. Maybe the boat just doesn't like where you're going. You don't scoff. Not anymore. Because you've seen how the boat listens. How it rocks when someone lies. How it stills when someone sings. How it seems to know the tone of the voyage better than any sailor on board. You run your fingers along the rail, feeling the tiny notches offerings once pressed into the wood. Flowers, hair, maybe a whisper, and you understand now. This boat is not just a thing, it is a place, a being, one carved by hands, but made alive by presence, human and not, seen and unseen. And as the wind picks up again, catching the sail just right, you feel it. A woman's blessing, a spirit's approval, a boat's smile. The wind stiffens slightly, now more command than whisper. The sail tugs harder at its lines, and the Balangay responds with a low creak, like a stretch after a long nap. The sea darkens to a deeper blue, rippling with sharper glints of sunlight, and for the first time all day, you feel the boat tense, not fearfully, just focused. Something's shifting. The crew adjusts accordingly. No one speaks. They just move. Hands tighten ropes, feet shift for balance, eyes scan the horizon. It's like watching an orchestra that doesn't need a conductor anymore. Everyone knows their part. The tempo is changing, and they're already in key. This is what separates ancient Filipino mariners from casual paddlers. They don't just react to the sea, they read it. And they do it faster than you can finish blinking. You step carefully toward the center mast, holding onto a line as the boat dips gently into a low trough between waves. The outriggers flex. The hull shudders, not out of stress, but anticipation. Because now it's time to remember something. These weren't just boats of beauty and ritual. They were marvels of engineering. Ask any naval historian, and they'll tell you grudgingly. Sometimes that pre-colonial Filipino ships were among the most advanced maritime designs in Southeast Asia. No iron, no rivets, no power tools, and still boats that could cross oceans, outrun foreign ships, outmaneuver attackers, and still glide into shore as gracefully as herons landing on glass. The Caracoa, in particular, was a kind of prehistoric missile, long, narrow, and shockingly fast. Twin outriggers stabilized its speed. Its low draft let it skim over coral reefs like a skipping stone. Its paddlers sat in staggered rows, each trained to move as one, muscles timed to the breath of the waves. One quirky fact: Spanish records from the 16th century describe Filipino warboats as flying fish fast, slippery, unpredictable. More than once, conquistadors mistook them for mere canoes, right before being circled, boarded, and, frankly, embarrassed. Historians still argue about the design's origins. Some point to Austronesian roots, some to Polynesian cousins. But most agree the Filipino execution was distinct, a blend of intuition and adaptation so refined it made European ships look like lumbering barges by comparison. And the difference? Flexibility. Literally. Where European ships were rigid, these vessels bent. The hull could sway slightly. The outriggers flexed like living limbs. The lashings tightened when wet, loosening when dry. It was a floating system of compensation and cooperation, like sailing a cathedral that also happened to know yoga. You sit near the edge now, just above the waterline. The waves slap gently at your feet. You notice the joinery again, the planks, the pegs, the absence of nails. How does it all stay together? The answer is in the tension. Each lashing pulls against another. Every joint is angled, layered, wrapped. The boat holds itself in balance not with brute force, but with harmony. You're not in a machine, you're in a system, and the system flows. The crew shifts again. One steps to the stern, adjusts a carved rudder-like oar. Another tightens a line. No words, no orders, just practiced movement, like breathing. This is design. Not just utility, not just survival, elegance. You hear the wind whistle through the sail and realize something else. These boats weren't just made to sail, they were made to perform. Not in a showy way, but in the way an eagle performs mid-dive. Precision, grace, the kind of beauty born not from appearance, but from function at its peak. The boat banks left, a little sharper this time. You grip the rail instinctively, but the crew doesn't flinch. This is a test. Maybe for you, maybe for the boat, maybe for the wind. You pass. The Balangay straightens, picks up speed again, and hums beneath your feet like it's proud of itself. You lean into the gust, hair in your face, sea in your nose, and you get it now. This isn't nostalgia. This is innovation. From people who understood that strength isn't about weight. It's about knowing when to bend and when to fly. The sea stretches endlessly now, like it's showing off. No land in sight, no sails on the horizon. Just the shimmer of water stacked all the way to the sky. The air is heavy with salt and sun and that deep, satisfying silence that comes when nothing has to be said. And yet, somehow, everything is being communicated. The Balangay glides through the open ocean like it was born for this, which, let's be honest, it was. But you're beginning to understand something deeper now. This boat doesn't just carry people, it carries power. Not the kind measured in weapons or flags, not in castles or land deeds. Out here, before colonizers showed up with their paperwork and proclamations, power looked like this. A boat that could go anywhere, and the people who knew how to sail it, because before the Philippines had a name, it had a network of islands, of communities, of alliances stitched together not by roads or kings, but by boats. Your ancestors didn't wait for empires to tell them who they were. They travelled, they traded, they connected, on their own terms. You're floating through the memory of that now. Somewhere in the haze ahead, there's a story not written, but remembered of a Datu whose fleet spanned more than 200 boats. Not soldiers, not invaders, traders, messengers, negotiators. His reach wasn't measured in land, but in how far his ships could glide before needing fresh palm wine. One quirky fact. Some boats weren't just named, they were ranked. You didn't just own a Balangay, you earned your place on one. And if your boat was respected enough, it became your status symbol, your identity, like driving the only car in a village that also floats, feeds your family, and carries diplomatic messages to Java. Historians still argue about the exact political structures of these early maritime polities. Were they kingdoms, confederacies, tribes? Most now agree they were barangays, a word rooted in the very boat you're riding. That's right, Balangay isn't just a noun, it's a whole form of government. Each barangay was a unit led by a datu, supported by elders, bonded by kinship and shared fate. And guess how it worked? You gathered your community, you built a boat, you moved together. So if your leader sailed off into the sunrise, that was your village now. You sip warm water from a bamboo flask and glance at the sky. The clouds are stacking slightly fluffy above, smooth below. One of the crew points and nods. You ask what he sees. Island. There. You blink. There's nothing. But he's right. Because sailors here know the shape of clouds changes above land, that the way birds circle means something, that the colour of the water, yes, even that tells you what's underneath, coral, sand, river mouth. The boat shifts again, not dramatically, just a subtle nudge, like a conversation turning mid-sentence, and you realise this is what leadership looked like. Long ago, a person who could read the sea, who could guide a crew, Who could name a boat, bless a tree, and leave no wake but stories? You think of the Balangay not as transport, but as territory, a place you bring with you, a floating home, a portable identity. That's how the ancient Filipinos saw themselves, not as islanders trapped by water, but as voyagers connected by it, not landbound, seabound, sea-freed. You lean into the prow now, spray on your face, the sail overhead flaring like a moonflower. The horizon head looks no closer, but it doesn't matter. Because out here, in this moment, on this boat, you are in the centre of a kingdom, and the sea is not a barrier. It's the path. The sky bruises at the edges now, turning soft shades of purple and orange as the sun slips behind a curtain of clouds. You're standing near the stern, arms lightly braced on the rail as the Balangay begins to hum a little louder. Not from the boat, from the sea. The water is no longer calm, but no one panics. In fact, the crew seems curious. The wind shifts first a flick, then a pull, and the sail responds instantly. The boat angles into the change like a cat sensing a new smell in the air. A cloud bank looms ahead, not angry, just thick, low, pale, like someone spilled milk over the horizon. The helmsman smirks. Good time to practice disappearing. You laugh, uncertain, but he's serious. Because ancient Filipino sailors didn't just build boats to travel, they built boats to vanish, to appear and disappear at will. This wasn't just for war, though it certainly helped in battle. This was strategy. This was survival. A boat that can't be tracked is a boat that's never caught. You hunker low as the crew begins to shift position. They pull in the sail slightly, adjusting the angle. One paddler kneels near the water's edge and drops a fistful of crushed leaves. The surface foams gently. A trick. A test. You ask what they're doing, he says. We're finding the shadow path. You blink. It's not a myth, not metaphor. It's real. On overcast days, when the light scatters, there's a way to read the sea. A certain shimmer reveals underwater ridges. A change in the water's movement hints at cross currents. And the clouds, the clouds become maps. A certain shape means fog is forming ahead. Another tells you where to sail into it. The Balangay dips into a thicker patch now, a soft mist curling at the edges of the deck. The sails are lowered slightly, not to lose speed, but to reduce visibility. You're moving smarter, not slower. You're watching the boat do what it does best, slip between the seen and unseen. This wasn't an accident of design. It was intentional. Some crews even carried bundles of smouldering herbs, not just for ritual, but for smoke. Want to vanish fast. Light a small fire near the stern. Let the wind carry the smoke behind you. Let the fog do the rest. It wasn't just deception, it was art. Historians still argue whether this was a formal tactic or just a byproduct of clever seamanship. But early colonial records tell of fleets that disappeared into fog banks mid-battle, then reappeared miles away, like sea phantoms, not magic, just mastery. One quirky method involved trailing floating leaves behind the boat, split palm fronds or shredded banana fibers. In certain light, they mimicked a full fleet's wake. The enemy chased the debris while the real boat turned silently in the other direction. You sit now, back against a woven bundle of cargo jars, dried fish, palm wine wrapped in cloth. The mist is thick around you. You can barely see the water's surface, and yet the Balangay moves like it knows, like it can smell the edge of the storm. The crew doesn't rush. They breathe with the boat. The paddles dip in sync. The sail flares, then rests. You don't feel lost. You feel hidden. And maybe, out here, that was as valuable as knowing where you were. The power not just to travel, but to disappear when needed. You glance at the horizon, or what used to be the horizon. It's gone now, swallowed in mist. No stars, no landmarks, just the creak of rope, the pulse of waves, and the slow, steady rhythm of paddles pushing into the unknown. And still you don't feel afraid, because the Balangay was built for this, to vanish, to reappear, to be wherever the world least expected. And in that silence, as the fog thickens and the wind curls around your skin, you realize the most powerful ships are the ones no one sees coming. The fog thins as dusk deepens. The mist unravels like thread between your fingers, and the outlines of the world begin to return blurred islands in the distance, faint stars above, the darkening mirror of the sea beneath your hull. But something lingers in the air, even as the boat steadies, even as the paddlers slow their rhythm and rest their arms. It's awe, because you've just watched a boat do something almost no one believes a prehistoric vessel should be able to do. You didn't simply sail, you vanished, and then returned. And now, as the night grows deeper and more stars appear first in handfuls, then by the hundreds you remember that for most of recorded history, outsiders underestimated these boats, mistook them for oversized canoes, called them primitive, dismissed them with the flick of a quill. That changed dramatically when the Spanish arrived. They expected docile fishermen, simple crafts, easy conquest. What they got instead was confusion. You lean back now, as one of the crew tosses a rope coil beside you. He smiles. He knows the story you're about to hear, because every sailor on this sea knows how it went down. The Spanish were stunned, not because the local boats were seaworthy, that would have been impressive enough, but because they were better, faster, more agile, built not for brute strength, but for finesse. There's one particular account, Spanish galleons, giants of the sea, lumbering beasts packed with guns trying to chase down a caracoa, and failing, not just once, again and again. The galleons turned slowly, too slowly. Their decks groaned, their sails strained. Meanwhile, the caracoa danced. It skated across the water, outrunning them with ease, its paddlers moving in perfect unison, its outriggers slicing tight circles around ships 5 times its size. They couldn't believe it. It was like watching a hawk outfly a horse. Historians still debate whether the Spanish ever truly grasped the sophistication of what they saw. Some wrote admiring reports, others tried to ignore the embarrassment. But the fact remains the Spanish envied these boats, tried to copy their speed, tried to learn their tricks. They never quite could. One quirky report mentioned Spanish officials asking locals to build similar boats for them. The locals agreed, but when the ships were delivered, they weren't the same. Missing something, less soul, more European. They didn't move the same way, because it wasn't just the shape, it was the relationship. The Balangay wasn't a tool, it was a partner, a presence to be consulted, cared for, trusted. You think back to what you've seen the rituals before cutting wood, the symbols painted on sails, the whispered names, the silence during fog, the unspoken agreement between boat and sailor. You don't command a boat like this, you accompany it. The crew shares another tale now half historical, half legend, a fleet of Filipino boats appearing out of the dawn mist, sails flared bright red. They surrounded a Spanish vessel before a single musket could be loaded. They didn't fire, didn't shout, just appeared. Let their presence speak. The Spanish surrendered. No fighting, just respect. You sit quietly as the stars finish their arrival. The Big Dipper hangs low to the north. The Southern Cross winks behind a passing cloud. The boat rocks gently, outriggers clicking softly like a heartbeat. You're surrounded by men and women who descend from those who built the boats the Spanish tried and failed to match, and they know it, not in an arrogant way, in a quiet, satisfied way. The way a craftsman smiles when someone finally realizes that art and function were never separate. The boat slides on, slow now, steady, not escaping, not proving, just being, the way it always has. And above, the stars write their silent applause, because the ships that last aren't the biggest. They're the ones that belong to the sea. The moon rises slow and full, dragging its silver sheen across the sea like a veil pulled gently over the water. You sit near the bow, knees pulled in, wrapped in a blanket that smells like dried palm and sun-warmed sailcloth. The crew is quiet now, not tired, reverent. The kind of stillness that only comes after a long day of proving yourself to a force much older than you. But the boat is still moving, and tonight it feels like it's moving through memory, because now you begin to notice the difference, not in speed, not in direction, in presence. The Balangay isn't just carrying you forward. It's carrying a story, one that, for centuries, the world tried to forget. You can feel the weight of it now. These centuries where the boat was docked, not for repairs, but by silence. When colonization didn't just bring swords, it brought erasure. Rituals once sung became secrets. Techniques once taught in sunlit clearings were whispered behind closed doors, or not passed on at all. The old masters grew old, the apprentices faded, and the boats they sat, rotting, disbelieved. Because when something disappears from power, it's easy to say it was never powerful to begin with. That's what happened here. The Balangay, once the pride of a maritime world, was gradually nudged into the shadows, rewritten, reduced, called a canoe in textbooks, a footnote, a prelude to real history, until it was almost gone. Almost. Because you can't erase a story carved into wood. Not when there are people who still remember the rhythm of the lashings, still know which tree sings when you tap it, still see stars not as decoration, but as direction. You think now of the elders, the ones who held the last scraps of knowledge like embers in their palms, even when no one else believed in fire anymore. Quirky fact. In some remote villages, elders continued to perform launch rituals well into the 20th century even without a boat to bless, just in case the knowledge might one day be needed again. Historians debate when exactly the Great Forgetting happened. Some say it was the 1600s, under religious suppression. Others argue it was gradual, through shifts in economy and language, but the result was the same: silence. Until one day, someone dug into the earth, literally. In Butuan, northern Mindanao, a construction project in the 1970s unearthed something: strange planks, fitted without nails, lashings of ancient fibre, ribs spaced just right. They called in experts, and what they found stunned them. A balangay, preserved in mud, hidden for centuries, and then another, and another, 9 in total. boats that had waited in the soil like buried voices, like scrolls of wood and water, and suddenly the story returned not as myth, but as fact. Carbon dated, measured, revered. You turn to the crew now, silhouetted against the moonlight. One of them hums a tune you've heard before, low and looping, like a memory stitched into rhythm, and you realize something. These boats didn't vanish. They waited for hands to remember, waited for eyes to see, waited for the sea to call them back. You grip the railing. The wood is cool, solid, older than you, and yet reborn. Because the Balangay isn't done sailing, not even close, and neither is the story. The star spins slowly overhead, tracing old songs across the sky. You're lying flat now, arms at your sides, the deck warm beneath your back and the faint scent of resin still clinging to the planks. The Balangay moves steady beneath you like the tide remembers your name, and you, dreamer of wood and water, are drifting through a story that almost disappeared, but not quite, because something incredible happened. The Balangay came back, not as a drawing in a dusty museum, not as a digital model with a voiceover, not as a romanticized piece of textbook nostalgia. No, she sailed back. The revival began not long after the boats were unearthed in Butuan. The people there didn't just marvel at them. They decided to build one from scratch, the old way. No nails, no plans, just knowledge collected, begged, remembered, pieced together from the surviving elders and the silence that came after. And against every expectation, it worked. The first modern Balangay, called the Masawa Hongbutuan, launched in 2009, a full-sized replica built using traditional techniques, steam-bent ribs, dowels instead of bolts, rattan lashings. A sail that listened to the wind instead of fighting it. And when it touched the water, something ancient touched back. People wept, not out of nationalism, not out of pride, but out of recognition, like seeing an ancestor walk through the door you thought you'd locked forever. Then they sailed it, not just around the bay, across the islands, from Butuan to Manila, from Manila to Palawan, from Palawan to Malaysia, even as far as Madagascar. No engine, no GPS, just stars, sea, and the Balangay. You sit up now, watching the horizon. The crew on this boat, your boat, are smiling as they recount the voyage. Some of them were there. Others grew up hearing about it. One of them proudly shows a faded photo from a laminated pouch of Balangay in full sail. Prow lifted like it's singing. They named that one Diwata ng Lahi, goddess of the people. You whisper it to yourself, and you feel something settle, because this isn't just about history. It's not even about boats. It's about reclamation. The Balangay isn't just a maritime artifact, it's a statement, a reminder that your ancestors weren't passive. They didn't wait for the world to come to them. They moved through it with elegance, with ritual, with the kind of quiet, unstoppable skill that colonial narratives tried to erase. One quirky detail. The builders of the revival Balangay had to relearn forgotten skills by doing them wrong first, bending ribs until they snapped, lashing until they sagged, tying lines the wrong way, then sitting for hours asking, how would the old ones have done this? And slowly, through trial and ash and rope-burned fingers, the old ways whispered back. You glance up again at the sail overhead. It flutters like a memory. You think of all the children now who have seen the Balangay float not just on paper, but on water, who've stood on its deck, who've heard it creak and groan and sing, and you realize the story is alive again, not because someone told it, because someone sailed it. The crew hums a song now. It has no lyrics, just notes, a rhythm that sounds like paddles in shallow water, like wind across woven sails, like the first morning after a long journey when the land smells unfamiliar and your soul feels bigger than it was when you left. The boat rocks gently, the stars above blink in rhythm, and the Balangay, reborn, just keeps going, as if she never stopped. It's near midnight now. The sea is ink, and the stars above are countless, too many to name, too steady to doubt. You're curled up beneath the curve of the prow, half awake, half dreaming, the wooden hull warming your back and the sea air brushing your face like the breath of a living myth. The boat moves slow, gentle. She's not rushing, she's remembering. And so are you, because here, on this sea, in this boat, you feel something pressing against your ribs. Not weight, not fear, grief, maybe but the good kind, the kind that tastes like rediscovery, like knowing something precious almost slipped away, but didn't. You remember everything you've seen, the shaping of the hull, the songs sung to the trees, the sails that listened, the fog that swallowed, the revival that refused to forget. And now, as you look up, you think not of what was lost, but what was saved. The Balangay isn't a memory, it's a message. And what it says, in every lash of rattan, in every creak of plank and gust of wind, is this: you were always capable of greatness, long before colonial timelines, long before maps labelled your islands with someone else's name, long before engines and charts and foreign flags. Your ancestors built these, and they sailed them across open ocean, across archipelagos, through storms, towards sunrise. One quirky fact you overhear now softly told between two crew members sharing dried fish and laughter: some of the revival voyages weren't perfect. Sometimes the boat leaked, sometimes the sail tore, sometimes they got lost, but they always found their way again, because the boat remembered, even when the people doubted, even when the modern tools failed, even when the horizon offered no clues. The Balangay still knew how to move, where to go, when to wait. That's the part no manual can teach. That's the part no museum can fully capture. This isn't just a lesson in history, it's a reunion between body and sea, between maker and vessel, between past and possibility. You run your hand along the hull once more. The wood is warm now, alive. You feel the joinery beneath your fingertips, the tiny places where tension and care and ritual have locked the whole thing together. There are no nails, just memory. And when you think of all the people who've ever sat where you're sitting, hands salt-crusted, eyes sunburnt, hearts full of horizon, you don't feel small. You feel anchored, because your people didn't just float, they flew, on sails made from stories, on hulls carved from prayers, on stars they didn't just follow but named. And when the waves rise tomorrow, they'll do what they've always done. They'll make room for the Balangay, because even the sea remembers who once ruled her waters. You lean back, close your eyes, and listen to the paddles, to the ropes, to the stories that drift in the wind, and somewhere in that deep, salt-dark silence, the boat whispers, "I never left, you just stopped looking." Dawn doesn't rise so much as breathe over the edge of the sea. It begins with a dim glow beneath the clouds, then softens the stars into memory, then stains the horizon with hints of amber, coral, and old gold. You sit upright now, the blanket slipping from your shoulders, your skin damp with sea air and sleep, your heartbeat still in time with the boat's gentle rhythm. The Balangay is coasting, not fast, not slow, just present. She doesn't need to prove herself anymore. She's done that again and again on ancient voyages and modern revivals, on long-forgotten missions and rediscovered dreams. She's still here, and that's the miracle. The crew begins to stir. One hums while folding a sailcloth, another checks the lashings. Fingers pressing into knots with the confidence of someone who knows they were tied right the first time. No urgency, just ritual, just respect. Because that's the rhythm the Balangay teaches. No rush, no waste, only movement with a meaning. You sip warm water from a clay jug passed down the line. The flavour is faintly herbal, maybe ginger or lemongrass. A nod to the old ways staying warm from the inside out. You breathe it in and glance over the side, where flying fish dart briefly from wave to wave like tiny silver comets. One of the paddlers grins. "Morning guides," he says. You smile. You get it now, because you've learned to see the sea, the way the clouds stack like mountains over unseen land, the way the current bends slightly where a river mouth must be hiding, the way the wind smells different just before it shifts. All of it speaks if you listen the way your ancestors did. And now, maybe, you do. But something else rises with the sun, a quiet sadness, because you know the journey is nearly over. Soon, the shore will return first as a dark smudge, then as shapes, then as voices, buildings, concrete. Time will catch up, and this boat, this moment, this whisper of the old world made new again, will gently drift back into story, but it won't be forgotten, because the Balangay refuses to be forgotten. One quirky footnote. In 2010, the Philippines declared the Balangay the national boat. It was formal recognition of what had long been sacred truth that before the modern nation, there were boats, before passports, there were paddles, before language, there were roots. Historians still debate what the Balangay represents. A technological marvel, a symbol of pre-colonial sovereignty, a spiritual link between people and nature. The answer, of course, is all of the above, because she doesn't belong to one discipline. She belongs to all of us, to the builders, to the sailors, to the women who whispered blessings, to the children who've seen her in museum courtyards, wondering what it would feel like to stand on her deck, wind in their faces. To you. You stand now, just as the sun breaches the edge of the ocean. Light spills over the deck, turning the ropes gold and the sail almost translucent. You stretch, slowly, feeling the movement of your body echo the boat's gentle sway. The helmsman points. There, just beyond the mist, an island appears. Home, or something like it. You feel the pull in your chest not to arrive, but to continue, to carry this journey forward in the way all stories are meant to be carried, by hand, by heart, by horizon. And as the Balangay angles toward shore, you don't wave goodbye. You whisper, "See you again," when the sea is ready. The shoreline welcomes you with a hush. No crowds, no banners, just the rustle of palms in the breeze, the soft sigh of waves over sand, and the distant call of birds greeting the sun with casual authority. The Balangay glides toward the beach like she's done this 1,000 times, because she has. And you? You don't step off the boat. You descend, carefully, quietly, as though returning from a dream you don't want to wake from too fast. The crew moves around you in practiced rhythm, lowering the sail, tying down the paddles, folding the mats that served as seats, shade, pillows, and storybooks. You see now how the boat closes herself at journey's end, not shutting down, just settling, like a performer folding her costume after the final bow. And in the sand ahead, someone waits, an elder, barefoot, wrinkled like water-smooth driftwood. They raise one hand in greeting, not high, not formal, just enough. You nod back, your feet now on land, but your heart still rocking gently somewhere off the coast of then, because what you've seen, what you've lived, can't be neatly folded into the usual historical categories. It wasn't just about sailing, or building, or remembering. It was about rejoining. You didn't learn something new. You came back to something old, something that was always yours. The Balangay rests behind you, half in water, half in memory. She's been many things across these 20 sections: a boat, a spirit, a whisper, a mirror. But now, at the edge of this soft morning, she is one more thing. She is quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from absence, the kind that follows completion. You turn once more, placing your palm on the hull, right where the prow curves like a smile. The wood is warm, familiar, listening, and you realize you don't need to say goodbye, because the story doesn't end. Not really. Not when someone else is already walking down the beach, barefoot, curious, ready to ask, "What was that boat?" And someone will answer, with a whisper, with a song, with another journey, because the Balangay never disappears. She waits until the sea is right, until the hands are ready, until someone remembers and sails again. Now that the journey has come to shore, you can rest. Close your eyes. Let the last ripple of sea wind fade from your skin. Let your breath move slow and wide, like the tide rolling into a quiet bay. You've been far tonight, across islands, across centuries, across stories carved in wood and stitched in sailcloth. And now, the boat is still. She's not gone. She's just sleeping, waiting for the next hands, the next wind, the next question whispered under stars. And you're part of that now. You've seen what was nearly forgotten, heard what the waves never stopped singing, felt the rise and fall of a vessel that carried not just people, but memory, craft, belief, and belonging. So let your body rest like the hull in calm water. Let your thoughts drift like a sail catching the lightest breeze. You don't need to paddle anymore. The wind will hold you now. No more lessons, no more maps, no more need to prove or remember. You've been the boat, you've felt the journey, and when you wake, you'll carry it, not as a fact, but as a feeling. That you come from people who carved their future from trees, who read stars like sentences, who tied each other together not with rope but with rhythm. Sleep now. Let the tide take you. Let the wind wrap you. Let the boat rest beside you.